Hi, first grade. It's Mrs. Crawford, and I am here with a mini lesson today that is going to help us think more about a story as we're reading it or listening to it. Today, our mini lesson is about thinking about the problem in the story and how it's solved. This is a thinking strategy or something that you're going to do when you're reading fiction, realistic fiction, those types of stories that typically have a problem and a solution. I'm going to use two stories that I have read in my previous read alouds. So if you have not read these stories before or heard them through my read alouds, I want you to stop the video, go down to the bottom of this post because I will have the links there for these stories. Listen to the stories. Think about maybe, can you find the problem? Did you hear the solution at the end? And then come back to the mini lesson, and I'm going to go through those different pieces of the story. So here's the books that I'm going to be talking about. The Duckling Gets a Cookie by Mo Willems, and I Want My Hat Back by John Classing. So if you have not heard these stories before or read these stories before, stop the video for a minute, go back and listen, do some thinking while you're listening, and then come back and join us for the rest of this mini lesson. Okay, here we go. So, in each of these stories, there was a problem. And at the end of the story, it was solved. That's usually how it works. You're going to find your problem at the beginning, and your solution will be at or near the end of the story. So let's think about The Duckling Gets a Cookie. If you remember when I read this story, at the beginning, a cookie just fell out of the sky when Duckling asked for one. And Duckling was excited to get the cookie. But if you remember, there was something wrong with the cookie. Do you remember what was wrong with the cookie? Yep, it had nuts in it. And Duckling doesn't like nuts. That was part of the problem. The great thing about this story is it almost has two problems. Duckling has a problem in the story, and Pigeon has a story, or has a problem, excuse me. So if I think about it, I would say that Duckling's problem, and I wrote it down on my little chart here, is that he doesn't like nuts, and he has a cookie that has nuts in it. But Pigeon's problem is, do you know what Pigeon's problem is? Take a second to think. He wants a cookie, and he didn't get one, right? That is his problem. So, Duckling has a cookie with nuts in it, and she doesn't like nuts. Pigeon wants a cookie. Any ideas on how they could solve that problem? Do you remember how they did solve that problem? If I take a look at my chart, I wrote down that the problem was Duckling does not like nuts and Pigeon wants a cookie. Now I'm going to come down to my solution. And on my chart, I wrote the solution. How did they solve this problem? Well, Duckling gives Pigeon his cookie, right? He doesn't like nuts, so he doesn't really want it. Pigeon wants a cookie, problem solved, right? And then at the very end, Duckling just asks for a new cookie with no nuts, right? So really, if you think about it, Duckling solves both the problems in this story. First, by giving Pigeon his cookie. See if I can find, oh, here it is. Giving Pigeon his cookie. He solves Pigeon's problem because now Pigeon has a cookie. And then he solves his own problem by doing something very simple and just asking, "May I have another cookie, please?" But this time with no nuts. So that was the problem and the solution in The Duckling Wants a Cookie. Is that what you were thinking? So now let's think back to I Want My Hat Back. The problem in this story is very clear from the very beginning, right? It says it right on the first page. My hat is gone. I want it back. So I put on my chart right away that the problem in this story is Bear's hat is missing, right? It's gone and he wants it back. So as I think more about the story and I get back to the end of the story, he finds his hat, right? He gets his hat back at the end of the story. But the question is how? How did Bear get his hat? Well, I thought about that, and it didn't just happen at the end, right? Throughout the entire story, Bear is going through asking the animals about his hat. So I put the solution to this story is that Bear asks about his hat. But while he's asking about his hat, he remembers seeing his hat. And that triggers his memory, so then he knows who took his hat, and he goes and he gets it back. One of the things that I love about this story, though, is the solution isn't perfectly clear. We know he asks, we know he remembers, we know that he finds Rabbit to get his hat back. But the question is, how does he get the hat back? That's the question. And we don't really know exactly how he gets it back. We just have to assume that maybe he ate Rabbit. The story kind of leads us to believe that maybe he ate Rabbit to get his hat back. We know the solution is he got his hat back, but we get to use our own imagination as to how he got his hat back. So, boys and girls, as you are reading a story, one of our thinking strategies is to ask ourselves as we're reading, what's the problem in this story and how is it being solved? Who's solving it? Okay. So if we think about our last mini lesson, we talked about who was in the story, what was happening, where they were at, all important things to think about. Now we're going to tighten it up, go a little deeper, a little closer, and think more specifically. What's the problem? Who's having the problem? How's the problem being solved? Who's solving the problem, right? Pigeon and Duckling had a problem. Duckling solved the problem. Bear had a problem, and he solved his own problem, right? So thinking about your problem and thinking about your solution will again help you when you come to the end of a story and maybe you have some questions there that need to be answered. Using this strategy of thinking while reading allows you to think more about the story, think deeper about the story, and it makes you learn some things that you might not have learned if you just read through it quickly. So remember, as a reader, we've got to read the tricky words. We have to read the words we know, and we have to think about the story as we're reading it. I hope this mini lesson helps you. I will be back with more. See you soon.